Greetings, everybody. I just wanted to produce a little short video here to emphasize a thought that comes from our passage that we studied on Sunday, Matthew 5:17 through 20. And the thing that I want to focus on is right here, and this is not unusual for us. When you see the word therefore, you kind of know that there's something that maybe you ought to think about. And so, I'm going to see if I can get rid of that. All right, there, that's better. There's something you ought to think about there, because therefore is always there for a reason. And in fact, if Shakespeare were to ask the question, because the question you always want to ask is, why is that there? Why did, in this case, it's Jesus. If this was in your red letter Bible, these letters would be red. Why did he say therefore? What is he trying to connect? Therefore always connects something. And if Shakespeare were to ask the question, he would say, therefore, wherefore art thou hither, therefore, which is just Shakespeare's way of saying, why are you here? Right? Now you can probably tell I've been studying Romeo and Juliet. All right, so on we go. So this is our focus, and I don't want to go into a ton of detail about everything else that's in here, but I do want to point out a couple of things, and I'm going to play around with some colors here and switch it up. Okay, so back here, therefore is always connecting something. So in the first couple of verses, Jesus has come along and said, okay, I have not come to abolish the law. Again, I don't know why I'm getting that box around my objects there, but let's see if I can get rid of that. I have not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill them. We talked about that on Sunday. For truly I tell you that until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear. All right, so this is a key element in what we're talking about here for a couple of minutes right here. Will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Now, we talked about that a little bit on Sunday as well. There is a clock ticking on what Jesus is saying here. Something else is going to happen when everything is accomplished. And that's not the point of this video, but we did talk about it some on Sunday. So this is a key element right here. Nothing of the law will disappear. Right? Which brings to mind, for me, it's this word. It's permanence. Is that A-N-C-E? I don't know. Forgive me if I spell it wrong. Permanence, right? The law, there's the word I want. The law is permanent. There is an element of permanence, a quality of permanence about it. And Jesus is saying, this is fixed. It is unchangeable. It is permanent. So that's the first part of this. That idea is connected to here. The law is permanent. And so you could look here and say, okay, the law is permanent. So, or therefore, and then now, and I'm going to switch up colors again here real quick. And now he comes along, he says, therefore, anyone who sets aside any of these commands or teaches others accordingly, and then the converse of that, but whoever practices and teaches these commands, and these things have a consequence kind of attached to them. Whoever sets them aside will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever practices and teaches these things will be called great. There it is. Great in the kingdom of heaven. Now this least and great thing, oh my goodness, that's kind of another discussion. And it's really interesting to even think about the fact that, wait a second, this is all in the kingdom of heaven. And there's a least and there's a great in the kingdom of heaven. We talked about it a little bit on Sunday, and that's, again, kind of not the point of this video. And you could add to that he comes along down here and he says, boy, if your righteousness does not surpass that of the Pharisees, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. So that's kind of related, this least, great, not enter. all kind of connected, related thoughts. All right. Now, but the thing that I want to get at here is, so I'm mixing my colors. The permanence, the law is permanent. Jesus says it's not going anywhere, not until everything's accomplished. So there are some prescribed practices here. And this, right here where it says practices and teaches, or here where he says sets aside, this is about obedience. That's what he's getting at here. It's about being obedient and teaching others to be obedient. And this is about kind of giving it a wink and a nod and not worrying about it, right? Setting it aside and saying, I'm not going to worry so much about those commands. So the permanence of the law is connected, boy, that's really bad, is connected to this issue of obedience. And what it does is it sets up a question that like every person has to answer for themselves. The permanence of the law means that you should obey it and you should teach others to obey it. That's what Jesus is saying here. This is going to be around, and so it would be wise for you to practice it and to teach it because it's not going anywhere. And so here what you have are the words of Jesus, right? And he's saying this. The law is permanent, and you would do well to obey it and to teach it. So when people hear those words of Jesus, every person has to face this decision. Do I believe that guy? Do I buy what he's saying? Do I think that this thing he's telling me, the law's not going anywhere, and so you're going to come out on top. You're going to do a whole lot better overall if you practice and teach others to practice this, if you are obedient to this law that God has expressed. Now, a thing here that you kind of maybe want to keep in mind a little bit is these Pharisees. I think part of what Jesus' problem was here was that the Pharisees were not always representing the spirit of God's law correctly. They kind of had it wrong in a lot of ways. They had it wrong. And so they were teaching people things about God's law that just weren't true. And so that was part of Jesus' problem with this whole thing. But the point, I got to wrap this up, the point I wanted to make was this therefore is sitting right here. And it's connecting a couple of things. What's it connecting? What is it connecting? It's connecting the concept of the fact that the law is a permanent thing and is eternal until until God says otherwise, until everything is accomplished, right? So it's permanent, and it would do you well to practice it and to teach others to practice it. Things are going to go better for you if you proceed in that manner. And he's saying that to all of us. So I just wanted to toss in this little video mostly about that word right there. And again, Shakespeare would have put it this way. Therefore, wherefore art thou hither, therefore, all right, ignore me. Well, don't ignore this, but ignore me. Hope to see you Sunday. Have a great week. Adios.